Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura B. Floss 2. Welcome or welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me today. So this is going to be the first video that I'm doing on the process to create our tree quilt. And so where I decided to begin was with just trying to figure out how to break down the tree onto the background and thinking about the space that I have available in my living room to hang it. And just the image itself and kind of the overall design of the quilt. So I'm just going to kind of talk through that process today a little bit, and then also share some, hopefully some tips and tricks. So if you decide to take this on, that maybe you won't have to go quite as in depth in your thought process as I did. Okay, we'll begin with the space that I have in my living room. I just measured, I have a curtain rod that hangs in my living room that I display different applique quilts on. And I'll insert a picture here of one of those so you can kind of get an idea of what I have available to me. So this space is basically 89 tall and 72 wide because of the rod. Now, my husband and I were talking, and we do want to kind of decorate around the tree a little bit. We want to hang like some garland from either side with some lights intertwined in it. And then we also want to have space at the bottom on the floor to just stack our gifts. So I wanted to take those two things into consideration when thinking about how big to make my quilt. And then I also just wanted to kind of think about the dimensions of the graphic I have and the fabric that I have and all of that good stuff. So this is what I've come up with, and I've written it down, and it's a little chicken scratchy, but it's part of the process. So we'll just hang in there together. All right, so I've decided the tree itself is going to be 70 tall and 50 wide. Now when I projected that onto my design wall, I was able to get like 69 by 52. So I know that I can kind of tweak that a little bit just to make sure that it is the 70 by 50 that I want. I can just like move some of the elements in the background in a little bit, and I can make the trunk of the tree a little taller if I need to. However, I need to break that down. But then I started thinking, I don't want to have to put this whole background of this quilt together and then be wrangling a 50 by 70 piece of fabric through my machine to applique on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that graphic again, and I'm going to print it out on a piece of paper, which I actually have already done, and I'm going to grid it. So that way I can kind of see, I can break the tree into rows, and I can kind of decide which pieces I can put in which places on the background. And it's really going to help when we go to lay this all out, because we'll know what goes where and how much space we have around those things and how much give and take we can have and all those good things. So I have measured my fabric. It is 42 inches wide. So I am going to be cutting 10.5-inch squares. So I have a 10-inch grid to work with. So let me show you this first little piece. I'm going to swing you down here and kind of walk through this. All right, sorry about the shadow here, but I'm sure that you can still see well enough that it won't bother you too much, I hope. What I've done, first of all, is I printed this graphic out on just a piece of typing paper, and I have drawn a border around it, and this is a 5 by 7-inch graphic. And you'll see that I do have a little bit of white space at the bottom and a little bit of white space at the top and a little bit of white space on either side. So none of these elements are going to be right up against the edge of these blocks. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my ruler and take just a pencil and draw a line every inch going down. Because remember, I want my tree to be 50 by 70, and this graphic is 5 by 7. So each one of these squares, each one of my 1-inch squares will be a 10-inch block on my background. I love it when math works like that. All right, so here's the last one for that. So now I can see that I definitely have some elements that can be on their own block, and I definitely have others that may be overlapping blocks. And to be quite honest with you, these items in the background, I'll probably move them one way or the other. so I don't have to sew over too many seams. All right, and then we're going to turn this the other way. And again, I'm just drawing a line every inch, just to kind of determine where all of these elements are going to fall on my background, and see if I can just like do any rows, or if I can shift a few things around to make it easier to applique on. All right, so here is my grid for my quilt. And yeah, definitely, I mean, there's definitely going to be some things that will overlap, but at the same time, I will be able to shift some elements around too, and just get those into rows so I can assemble the quilt better, so I don't have a 50 by 70 inch piece of fabric to work with. All right, so here is my grid for the quilt. The next thing I'm going to do is cut out all of my 10.5 inch squares, and I'm probably going to evaluate this and decide how I want to sew those squares together, because if I look at this, I could definitely sew like these 4 squares together and not be overlapping too much and have a lot of elements placed on there. I could definitely do like 6 up here. And we'll just do sections, and then we'll assemble, and then, you know, go ahead and applique over the overlaps. And yeah, this is going to work out really well. I'm pretty excited about this project. All right, so like I said, the next things that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all of my 10.5 inch squares for the background, and then I'm probably going to kind of map it out on how those are going to fall on my quilt, because I don't want two of the same thing together. I don't want two of the backgrounds like touching, the same backgrounds touching. So I'll lay that all out on my pattern, and then I will hang the interfacing on the design wall and start tracing my shapes from that projected image. Okay, so just because I don't think that you probably care to watch me cut 10.5 inch squares, I'm going to skip that part, and I'm not going to show that. But we will reconnect when I'm getting ready to project the image onto my design wall and trace those shapes onto the interfacing. I really hope you enjoyed this kind of first step for the quilt, and hopefully you picked up a couple tips and started thinking about the design that you might want to try to make, and how to grid it out, how to adjust the size so you're working with something a little more even. I would definitely suggest trying to stick to a grid size that you're comfortable with, you know, like, and that doesn't, you know, it doesn't mean it has to be 10 inches, but pick something that you can easily translate to paper so you can see where your pieces divide and how they will come together. And then also just, you know, kind of think about how big you want your quilt to be. Measure your space. Think about, or if it's going to be for a bed, measure the bed. Figure out how big, you know, width and length, and your dimensions, and how big you can get your graphic, and all of that kind of stuff comes into play. So yeah, I'm excited about this design process. I'm so happy that we're going to be joining this little journey together. And I hope you continue to watch. I hope that you haven't been like, oh my gosh, this girl is crazy. I'm not doing anything like this. If nothing else, you can watch along and be like, wow, yeah, I knew you were crazy when you started that. So I'm glad I was here for the craziness. But hey, I appreciate you liking and sharing my videos. I really appreciate when you share them out with other friends and crafting buddies. If you like anything that you have seen, please make sure you like the video, and, you know, have a great time just creating something today. I hope that you are doing well, and until next time, happy stitching.